Spring came early that year. The snow melted from the mountains, and wildflowers began to bloom in the desert. James and Ayanna had survived their first winter together, and they were both surprised by how well their partnership had worked. Ayanna had gotten much better at walking with her wooden legs. She could now move around the ranch without help. She had also learned to ride a horse again. James had modified an old saddle with extra straps and supports so she could stay on the horse even without full legs. James had learned to see the desert the way Ayanna did. He could now find water by reading the signs in the landscape. He knew which plants were useful and which animals were nearby just by looking at their tracks. His survival skills had improved greatly, but as the weather got warmer, they both knew they would have to face the outside world again. They could not stay hidden at the ranch forever. The first test came in late spring. James was working in the garden they had planted when he saw dust in the distance. Someone was coming. He ran to get his rifle and called for Ayanna. "Riders coming," he said. "3 of them." Ayanna looked through the window. "They are white men," she said. "Maybe ranchers looking for cattle." James was worried. If these men saw Ayanna, there could be trouble. Many white people would not understand why a cowboy was living with an Apache woman. "You should hide," James told Ayanna. "No," she said firmly. "I will not hide anymore. If we are going to live in this world, people will have to accept us as we are." The 3 riders came into the ranch yard. They were dusty and looked tired. James went outside to meet them, with Ayanna beside him on her wooden legs. The lead rider was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. "Afternoon," he said. "I am Tom Bradley. I own the big ranch about 20 miles south of here. We are looking for some cattle that wandered off." "I am James Mackenzie," James replied. "This is Ayanna. We have not seen any cattle, but you are welcome to look around." Tom Bradley looked at Ayanna with curiosity, but not hostility. He could see that she was Apache, and he noticed her wooden legs. "Ma'am," he said politely, tipping his hat to her. Ayanna was surprised. She had expected the white rancher to be rude or threatening. Instead, he was treating her with respect. "We have water and coffee if you want to rest," James offered. The 3 ranchers accepted the invitation. As they sat around the table in the house, Tom Bradley asked questions about how James and Ayanna had come to be living at the abandoned ranch. James told a shortened version of the story. He explained how he had found Ayanna dying in the desert and decided to help her. He did not mention that she had been a warrior or that her own tribe had abandoned her. "That was a good thing you did," Tom Bradley said. "Not many men would have stopped to help." "Ayanna has taught me a lot about living in this country," James said. "She knows things about the desert that I never would have learned on my own." Tom Bradley looked thoughtful. "You know, I have been having trouble with rustlers stealing my cattle. They know the desert better than my men do. We cannot track them once they get into the rough country. Maybe you 2 could help us." This was an opportunity James had not expected. If they could work for Tom Bradley, they would have a way to make money while staying together. "What kind of help do you need?" James asked. "I need someone who can track the rustlers and find out where they are hiding my cattle," Tom Bradley said. "Someone who knows the desert like an Apache." James looked at Ayanna. She nodded slightly. "We could try," James said. "But you should know that some people might not like you hiring us." "Let me worry about that," Tom Bradley said. "If you can find my cattle, I do not care what other people think." Over the next few months, James and Ayanna worked for Tom Bradley and several other ranchers in the area. Ayanna's knowledge of the desert made her an excellent tracker, even though she could not walk as well as she used to. James handled the parts of the job that required more physical activity. They were successful at finding stolen cattle and catching rustlers. Word spread about the unusual partnership between the white cowboy and the Apache woman. Some people disapproved, but most were impressed by how effective they were. As summer turned into fall, James and Ayanna faced a new challenge. A group of Apache warriors appeared near Tom Bradley's ranch. They were from a different band than Ayanna's original tribe, but they knew who she was. The Apache warriors wanted to know why she was helping white ranchers catch Apache men who were stealing cattle. In their view, she was betraying her own people. Ayanna met with the warriors alone. She explained that most of the rustlers they had caught were not Apache at all, but white and Mexican criminals who were stealing from everyone, including Apache bands. I am not helping white people fight Apache people, she told the warriors. I am helping honest people fight thieves. The warriors were not entirely convinced, but they respected Ayanna's reputation as a former warrior. They agreed not to cause trouble as long as she did not actively work against Apache interests. This meeting gave Ayanna an idea. She realized that she could serve as a bridge between the Apache world and the white world. Both sides trusted her, to some degree, and both sides needed someone who could communicate with the other. She began to serve as a translator and negotiator when conflicts arose between ranchers and Apache bands. When Apache warriors raided a ranch, she could talk to them and often convince them to return stolen property without a fight. When white settlers wanted to use Apache land, she could explain the situation to Apache leaders and help work out agreements. James supported her in this work. He had never wanted to be a fighter anyway. He preferred solving problems through talking rather than shooting. Their reputation as peacemakers grew throughout the territory. Government officials began asking for their help when there were serious disputes between whites and Apaches. They were not always successful, but they prevented several wars that could have cost many lives. During their second winter at the ranch, Ayanna received unexpected news. A young Apache man came to see her. He was from her original tribe. Your uncle the chief wants you to know that he is proud of what you have become, the young man said. He says you found a way to be a warrior without legs. He says you are fighting for peace instead of fighting for war. But you are still fighting for your people. Ayanna was moved by this message. She had thought her uncle was ashamed of her for being left behind. Now, she learned that he had been hearing stories about her work and was proud of her. Tell my uncle that I have not forgotten the lessons he taught me, Ayanna said. Tell him that I am still serving my people, just in a different way. As their third spring together approached, James and Ayanna had built something neither of them had expected when they first met. They had created a new kind of life that combined the best of both their worlds. Ayanna had learned to read and write English. She could now keep written records of their negotiations and agreements. She had also learned about white people's laws and customs, which made her a better negotiator. James had learned to speak some Apache. He understood Apache customs and religious beliefs. This made him one of the few white men who could communicate effectively with Apache leaders. Together, they had proven that people from different cultures could work together if they respected each other and were willing to learn. They had shown that enemies could become partners, and that people who seemed useless could find new ways to be valuable. Their ranch became a meeting place where whites and Apaches could come to settle their differences peacefully. Children from both cultures came to learn from them. Young white men learned desert survival skills from Ayanna. Young Apache men learned about white people's ways from James. Do you ever wish things had been different? James asked Ayanna one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. Do you mean, do I wish I still had my legs? Ayanna replied, yes, and that your tribe had not left you, and that we had met under different circumstances. Ayanna thought about this question. If I still had my legs, I would probably still be raiding and fighting. I might be dead by now. If my tribe had not left me, I would never have learned the things I know now. If we had met while I was still a warrior, we would have been enemies. She paused and looked at James. I think everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. We both lost the lives we had before, but we found something better together. James nodded. He felt the same way. He had lost his old life in the war, and Ayanna had lost her old life when she lost her legs. But together, they had built something new and good. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky red and orange, James and Ayanna planned their future. They would continue their work as peacemakers. They would continue to show that different peoples could live together in harmony. They had started as a white cowboy and an Apache warrior who should have been enemies. They had become partners, friends, and proof that hope could grow even in the hardest circumstances. They had forged a new path that neither of their peoples had imagined before, and they had done it together. Collins saw the perfect shot on James's target. She blinked twice and looked again. The hole was right in the center of the black silhouette, exactly where it should be. A shot, she said loudly. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Torres walked over to get a better look. He squinted at the target 25 meters away. That is a pretty good hit, he admitted. But one shot does not make you a marksman. James did not respond. He was already lining up his second shot. His stance was different from what the other officers used. His feet were slightly wider apart. His grip on the gun was firm, but not tight. His breathing was controlled and steady. The second shot rang out. Another perfect hit. This bullet went through the same hole as the first one. Walsh whistled softly. Damn, he can shoot. Two lucky shots, Collins said. But her voice did not sound as confident as before. James fired 3 more bullets in quick succession. Each shot was placed exactly where he wanted it. All 5 holes were clustered in the center of the target. The electronic scoring system showed a perfect score. The shooting range was loud, but several officers had stopped their own practice to watch James. Word was spreading that the palace guard could actually shoot. Some of them looked impressed. Others looked skeptical. Okay, so you can hit a target, Torres said. That is basic military training. Any soldier should be able to do that. James ejected his empty magazine and loaded a fresh one. You are right, he said. Any soldier should be able to hit what they aim at. Should be able to, but most cannot, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Detective Chief Inspector Robert Hayes. He was in his 50s with gray hair and a thick mustache. Hayes had been with the Metropolitan Police for 30 years. He had also served in the military before that. People respected his opinion. What do you mean, Chief? Walsh asked. Hayes walked closer to James's lane. I mean that most soldiers are terrible shots. The military does not have time to make everyone an expert marksman. They teach you to point the gun in the right direction and pull the trigger. That is about it. So, how is this guy different? Collins asked. Hayes looked at James's target through a pair of binoculars. Look at that grouping. Those 5 shots could be covered by a coin. That is not basic military training. That is advanced marksmanship. Torres felt defensive. He had been a good shot in the army. At least, he thought he had been. I can shoot pretty well too, he said. Prove it. Collins challenged him. Torres walked to the lane next to James. He had been watching James shoot and felt confident he could match that performance. Torres had been the best shot in his unit back in Afghanistan. He had even won a few shooting competitions. Torres loaded his service pistol with 15 rounds. He took his stance and aimed at his target. Like James, his target was set at 25 meters. Torres breathed in, breathed out, and fired. The bullet hit the target in the 9 ring. Good, but not perfect. Torres fired 4 more shots. They were all good hits. 3 9s and 1 10. It was solid shooting for a police officer. Torres felt pleased with himself. Beat that palace boy, Torres said with a grin. James looked at Torres's target. That is good shooting, he said sincerely. Damn right it is, Torres replied. Your turn to try and match it. But James was not looking at a 25-meter target anymore. He was talking to the range officer, a thin man with thick glasses who controlled the electronic target system. Can you move my target back to 100 meters? James asked. The range officer looked confused. 100 meters? With a pistol? Yes, please. Collins started laughing. 100 meters? What do you think this is? A video game. You cannot hit anything at that distance with a handgun. Torres joined in the laughter. Come on, man. Be realistic. Even with a rifle, 100 meters is a long shot. James waited patiently while the range officer moved his target to the maximum distance the range allowed. The black silhouette looked tiny at that distance. Most people would have trouble seeing it clearly, let alone hitting it. This is ridiculous, Collins said. You are just showing off now. Me he is compensating for something, Walsh added. The other officers laughed. James ignored the comments. He was studying his target through the range's spotting scope. At 100 meters, the target looked very small. The center ring was only about 4 inches across. It would be a challenging shot even with a rifle. Tell you what, Collins said. If you can put 5 shots in the black at that distance, I will buy drinks for everyone here. And if he misses? Torres asked. When he misses, Collins corrected, he buys the drinks. James looked around at the group of officers watching him. There were now about 10 people gathered around his lane. Some looked amused. Others looked curious. A few looked doubtful. That seems fair, James said quietly. Hayes stepped forward. Hold on. This is not really fair. Hitting a target at 100 meters with a pistol is extremely difficult. Even for an expert. Then he should not have asked for the target to be moved back, Collins said. He made his bed. Now, he can lie in it. James began preparing for the shot. He checked his pistol to make sure it was functioning properly. He examined his ammunition. He adjusted his stance slightly to account for the longer distance. The range grew quieter as other shooters stopped to watch. Everyone wanted to see if the palace guard could make an impossible shot. Torres felt a bit bad about the situation. The bet seemed unfair now that he thought about it. Look, mate, he said to James, you do not have to do this. 100 meters is crazy far for a pistol. It is a long shot, James agreed, but not impossible. Have you ever tried it before? Walsh asked. James paused. I have shot at longer distances than this. With a pistol? Sometimes, Collins snorted. Right. I am sure you were sniping terrorists from your guard post at Buckingham Palace. The comment stung more than James let show. He had indeed shot at people from much longer distances, but never at Buckingham Palace. That had been in other places, darker places, places he tried not to think about anymore. James raised his pistol and took aim. At 100 meters, the front sight of his gun almost completely covered the target. He would have to rely on his training and instincts to place the shots accurately. The first shot was always the hardest. James controlled his breathing and squeezed the trigger smoothly. The gun recoiled in his hands. The bullet flew downrange toward the tiny target. Through the spotting scope, the range officer could see where the bullet hit. It is in the black, he announced. Just barely, but it is in. The officers around James looked surprised. Collins frowned. That was not supposed to happen. James fired his second shot without hesitation. Again, the bullet found its mark in the black center of the target. 242, the range officer called out. Torres was no longer laughing. How is he doing that? James fired his third shot. Another hit. 3, the range officer announced. The fourth shot was perfect. Dead center. 4 hits, and that last one was a bullseye, the range officer said. His voice showed his amazement. James took his time with the 5th and final shot. He breathed slowly and steadily. His heart rate was calm. His hands were rock solid. He squeezed the trigger one last time. 5 for 5, the range officer called out. All in the black. 3 of them in the 10 ring. The shooting range was completely silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. 10 police officers stared at James in disbelief. What they had just witnessed should not have been possible. Collins opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Torres shook his head slowly. Hayes whistled under his breath. Well, James said as he made his pistol safe. I guess the drinks are on you. Collins stared at the target in shock. Her mouth hung open. She blinked several times as if she could not believe what she was seeing. 5 bullets, 100 meters, all hits. With a pistol. That is not possible, she said finally. The range officer was looking through his spotting scope again. I can confirm all 5 shots hit the target. 3 are in the 10 ring. 2 are in the 9 ring. It is incredible shooting. Torres rubbed his eyes and looked again. The tiny holes in the distant target were clearly visible through the binoculars. I have never seen anything like that, he said quietly. Word was spreading through the shooting range. Officers from other lanes were walking over to see what the commotion was about. Soon, there were 15 people gathered around James's lane. What happened here? Asked Detective Sergeant Lisa Park. She was a firearms instructor for the Metropolitan Police. She had been teaching officers how to shoot for 10 years. The palace guard just put 5 rounds in the black at 100 meters, Hayes explained. With his service pistol. Park looked at James with new interest. You are police trained? Military trained, James corrected. What was your specialty? James paused. He was getting tired of these questions. Infantry, he said simply. Park nodded. Infantry training is good, but what you just did goes way beyond infantry training. That was expert-level marksmanship. Collins finally found her voice again. It was luck. Pure luck. No way he can do it again. You want to bet on that too? Torres asked her. Actually, yes, Collins said. Her pride was hurt. She did not like being wrong about people. Double or nothing. If he can do it again, buy drinks for everyone. If he misses even once, he pays for 2 rounds. James was reloading his magazine. I do not drink alcohol, he said. Then you can buy soft drinks, Collins replied. The point is, you cannot repeat that performance. It was a fluke. Hayes stepped forward. Sarah, you should quit while you are behind. No way, Collins said. I have been shooting for 15 years. I know what is possible and what is not. What just happened was not possible. James finished loading his magazine. He looked around at all the faces watching him. Some looked hopeful. Others looked doubtful. A few looked worried. I do not want to take your money, James said to Collins. You are not going to take my money, Collins replied. Because you are going to miss. Torres felt uncomfortable. The bet was getting out of hand. Maybe we should just call it even, he suggested. No, Collins said firmly. I want to see him try again. And this time, I want witnesses. Park volunteered to operate the spotting scope. I will call each shot as it hits, she said. James took his position at the firing line. The target was still set at 100 meters. It looked just as small and distant as before. The afternoon light was starting to fade, which would make the shots even more difficult. Same rules, Collins announced loudly. 5 shots. All must hit the black. If even one misses, he loses. James raised his pistol and took aim. The weight of the gun felt familiar in his hands. The grip was exactly right. The trigger pull was smooth and consistent. James had fired thousands of rounds through this pistol. He knew exactly how it would behave. The first shot rang out. The bullet flew through the air toward the distant target. Hit. Park called out immediately. Center of the 9 ring. Collins felt her stomach drop. Maybe the first round had been luck. But 2 perfect shots in a row was starting to look like skill. James fired his second shot without hesitation. He was in a rhythm now. His breathing was controlled. His stance was solid. His focus was complete. Hit, Park announced. Dead center. 10 ring. The crowd was getting larger. Officers from other police units had heard about the shooting exhibition. Some were taking pictures with their phones. Others were placing side bets on whether James would make all 5 shots. The third shot was perfect. Park did not even need to look through the scope. She could see the impact through her binoculars. Another 10, she called out. Collins was starting to sweat. This was not going the way she had planned. The palace guard was making her look foolish in front of her colleagues. James fired his 4th shot. The recoil was exactly the same as the previous 3 shots. His follow-through was smooth and controlled. 10 ring again, Park announced. 4. For 4. The shooting range was completely quiet now. Everyone was watching James prepare for his final shot. Even the officers at the other lanes had stopped shooting to see what would happen. James took his time with the 5th shot. He breathed in slowly and let half the air out. He aligned his sights perfectly on the tiny target. His finger found the trigger and began to apply pressure. The shot broke cleanly. The bullet left the barrel and flew downrange. At 100 meters, it took almost half a second for the bullet to reach the target. Hit, Park called out. 5-4-5, all in the black. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Officers were shaking their heads in amazement. Several people were taking more pictures. Collins looked like she had been punched in the stomach. She had just lost another bet. Worse, she had been completely wrong about James's abilities. Okay, she said weakly. I owe everyone drinks. But James was not finished. He ejected his empty magazine and loaded a fresh one. Actually, he said, I was wondering if anyone else would like to try the same shot. Torres laughed nervously. At 100 meters? With a pistol? Are you crazy? You said you were a good shot, James reminded him. This would be a good chance to prove it. Park was intrigued. I will try it, she said. But I want to use my own gun. Park was an excellent shot. She had won several police shooting competitions. She taught other officers how to improve their marksmanship. If anyone could match James's performance, it would be her. Park loaded her pistol and took her position at the firing line. She spent several minutes studying the target through the spotting scope. She adjusted her stance and grip. She took several practice shots at a closer target to warm up. Finally, Park was ready. She raised her pistol and aimed at the distant target. The first shot felt good as it left the gun. Hayes was operating the spotting scope now. Miss, he called out. Just to the left of the target. Park looked frustrated. She had been sure that shot would hit. She fired again. Miss, Hayes announced. High and right this time. Park fired 3 more shots. None of them hit the target. She lowered her pistol and shook her head. That is incredibly difficult, she admitted. I can barely see the target, let alone hit it. Torres decided to try next. He was confident in his shooting ability. He had been one of the best marksmen in his army unit. Torres took his time preparing for the shots. He studied the target carefully. He adjusted his sights. He took several deep breaths to calm his nerves. The first shot missed by 6 inches. The second shot missed by even more. Torres managed to hit the target with his third shot, but it was barely in the white outer ring. His fourth and fifth shots missed completely. This is impossible, Torres said. How did you make it look so easy? James was cleaning his pistol with a small cloth. Practice, he said simply. Practice? Collins asked. How much practice does it take to shoot like that? James thought about the question. How could he explain 8 years of special forces training? How could he describe the thousands of hours he had spent on shooting ranges around the world? How could he tell them about the real targets he had engaged at much longer distances? Quite a bit, he said finally. Walsh, the young officer, was still staring at James in amazement. Where did you learn to shoot like that? He asked. The military teaches marksmanship, James replied. Not like that. They do not, Torres said. I was in the army too. We never learned anything close to that level of shooting. James finished cleaning his gun and packed it away. Different units have different training standards, he said. Hayes was studying James more carefully now. Something about the man's movements and mannerisms seemed familiar. Hayes had worked with military personnel before. He had also worked with some very specialized units during his career. What unit did you serve with? Hayes asked directly. James closed his gun case and picked up his bag. Just regular army, he said. For 8 years? Yes. Hayes was not satisfied with that answer. Regular army infantry soldiers did not shoot like that. They did not move like that. They did not have that level of calm control under pressure. What was your job in the army? Hayes pressed. James headed toward the exit. I was a soldier, he said. Now I am a guard. That is all there is to it. But Hayes knew there was more to the story, much more. As James walked away, Hayes made a mental note to do some research. He wanted to know exactly who James Mitchell really was. Collins watched James leave. She was still in shock from what she had witnessed. I guess I owe everyone drinks, she said quietly. 2 rounds, Torres reminded her. You doubled the bet, remember? Collins groaned. This was going to be an expensive evening, but more than that, she felt embarrassed. She had completely misjudged James. She had assumed he was just a ceremonial guard with no real skills. She had been very wrong. As the other officers began to pack up their equipment, they were all thinking the same thing. There was much more to James Mitchell than met the eye. The quiet palace guard had secrets, and those secrets involved some very serious military training. The next morning, Hayes arrived at his office early. He had spent most of the night thinking about James Mitchell. The palace guard's shooting performance had been extraordinary. Hayes had seen many good marksmen in his 30 years of police work. He had also worked with military snipers and special forces soldiers. What he witnessed yesterday was at that elite level. Hayes turned on his computer and opened the military personnel database. He had special access because of his rank and security clearance. He typed in James Mitchell's name and waited for the results. The file that appeared was mostly classified. Hayes could see basic information, dates of service, rank progression, and general unit assignments, but the important details were blacked out. That told Hayes everything he needed to know. Regular Army soldiers did not have classified service records. Only special operations personnel had files like this. Hayes printed out what information he could see and studied it carefully. James had served 8 years, as Hayes had said. He had reached the rank of staff sergeant. His service record showed deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, and several other locations that were classified. There were commendations for valor and marksmanship, but the specific details of his service were protected information. Hayes leaned back in his chair. He was now certain that James Mitchell was not just a regular infantry soldier. The man was Special Forces, probably SAS based on his accent and training level. That would explain the incredible shooting ability and the calm demeanor under pressure. Meanwhile, at the shooting range, word of yesterday's demonstration was spreading. Officers who had not been there were hearing about it from those who had witnessed it. The story was growing with each telling. Detective Constable Amy Chen had heard 3 different versions of the story. In one version, James had hit a target at 200 meters. In another, he had done it blindfolded. Chen decided to go to the range herself to get the facts. When she arrived, she found Collins and Torres still talking about what they had seen. Both officers looked tired. They had stayed up late drinking the alcohol that Collins had been forced to buy for everyone. "Is it true?" Chen asked. "Did the palace guard really hit a target at 100 meters with a pistol?" "5 shots, Torres confirmed. All hits. I saw it with my own eyes. Twice." Collins added miserably. "He did it twice. I lost 2 bets." Chen whistled softly. "That is incredible. Where did he learn to shoot like that?" "He claims it was just regular army training," Torres said. "But I was in the army too. We never learned anything like that." Collins was looking at her phone. She had been researching military marksmanship training on the internet. According to this website, the average army soldier can hit a target at 300 meters with a rifle. But that is completely different from hitting a target at 100 meters with a pistol. "How different?" Chen asked. "Very different," Torres explained. "A rifle is much more accurate than a pistol. The bullet is bigger and faster. The sights are better. Hitting a target at 100 meters with a pistol is like hitting a target at 500 meters with a rifle." Chen was impressed. "So he is really good." "Really good does not cover it," Collins said. "What we saw yesterday was expert level, professional level, the kind of shooting you see from military snipers." At that moment, Hayes walked into the shooting range. He was carrying a folder with James's service record inside. He had decided to share what he had learned with the other officers. "I did some research on our palace guard friend," Hayes announced. The 3 officers gathered around him eagerly. They all wanted to know more about James Mitchell. Hayes opened the folder and showed them the printout. James Mitchell, 8 years military service, staff sergeant rank, multiple deployments to combat zones. "That sounds pretty standard," Torres said. "Look closer," Hayes said. He pointed to the classification markings on the document. "See these black bars? That means most of his service record is classified." Collins studied the document. "What does that mean?" "It means he was not regular infantry," Hayes explained. "Regular soldiers do not have classified service records. Only special operations personnel have files like this." Torres felt his stomach drop. "Special operations? Like what kind?" "Hard to say for certain," Hayes replied, "but based on his shooting ability and the level of classification, I would guess SAS, Special Air Service." The 3 officers stared at Hayes in shock. SAS was the most elite military unit in the British Army. They were legendary for their skills in combat, reconnaissance, and counter-terrorism operations. "You think the Palace Guard is SAS?" Chen asked quietly. "Former SAS," Hayes corrected. "He left the military 3 years ago to join the Queen's Guard." Collins felt sick. She had been mocking a member of the most elite military unit in the world. She had called him a toy soldier and suggested he had never seen real combat. In reality, he had probably seen more combat than all of them combined. "Oh God," she said. "What have I done?" Torres was remembering his own comments from yesterday. He had questioned whether James knew which end of the gun the bullets came out of. He had suggested that James had spent his military career cleaning toilets and peeling potatoes. "We really messed up," Torres said. Hayes nodded. "SAS soldiers are trained to be invisible. They blend in with regular people. They do not advertise their background or abilities." James was probably hoping to quietly practice his shooting without drawing attention to himself. "Instead, we turned it into a circus," Collins said. She felt terrible about her behavior. Chen was still processing the information. Why would someone leave SAS to become a ceremonial guard? That seems like a big step down. Hayes had been wondering the same thing. "Combat stress," he said finally. "A lot of special forces soldiers struggle with PTSD after years of deployment. Maybe James needed a quieter life." The four officers stood in silence for several minutes. They were all thinking about how differently they would have treated James if they had known his background from the beginning. "What do we do now?" Torres asked. "We apologize," Hayes said firmly, "and we show him the respect he deserves." Collins nodded. "When does he usually come here to practice?" "Same time as yesterday," Torres said. "Around 3 in the afternoon." They did not have to wait long. At exactly 3 o'clock, James walked through the glass doors of the shooting range. He was wearing the same civilian clothes as before. He looked calm and relaxed, as if nothing unusual had happened the day before. James signed in at the front desk and collected his safety equipment. He did not seem to notice the four officers watching him from across the room. Hayes approached him first. "Mr. Mitchell, could we have a word?" James looked up from his equipment bag. "Of course. What can I do for you?" Hayes glanced at the other officers. Collins looked nervous. Torres looked embarrassed. Chen looked curious. "We owe you an apology," Hayes said. "All of us." James looked confused. "For what?" "For yesterday," Collins said, stepping forward. "For the way we treated you. For the things we said." James shrugged. "You did not say anything that bad." "Yes, we did," Torres insisted. "We mocked your service. We questioned your abilities. We treated you like you were just some ceremonial soldier playing dress up." "You are ceremonial soldiers," James pointed out. "That is what the Queen's Guard does." Hayes decided to be direct. "We know about your background," he said. "We know. You served with 22 SAS. James's expression did not change, but his eyes became more alert. "I do not know what you are talking about. Your service record is classified," Hayes continued. 8 years of deployments to classified locations. Commendations for valor and marksmanship. That is not regular army, James. That is special operations." James was quiet for a long moment. He studied each of the four officers carefully. They all looked sincere. They all looked apologetic. "Why does it matter?" James asked finally. "Because we treated a war hero like he was some kind of joke," Collins said. "Because we disrespected someone who has probably done more for this country than all of us put together." James picked up his equipment bag. "I am not a war hero," he said quietly. "I was just doing my job." "What was your job?" Chen asked. James hesitated. He had spent 3 years trying to put his old life behind him. He had chosen the Queen's Guard specifically because it was peaceful and routine. No one got hurt standing outside Buckingham Palace. "Counter-terrorism," he said finally. "Hostage rescue. Target elimination." The officers stood in stunned silence. Target elimination meant James had been a sniper. He had killed people. Probably many people. "How many?" Torres asked, then immediately regretted the question. James looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed much older. "Enough," he said simply. Collins felt tears forming in her eyes. "I am so sorry," she said. "I had no idea." "You were not supposed to have any idea," James replied. "That was the point." Hayes stepped forward. "Why did you leave? Why give up special operations to become a ceremonial guard?" James was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I got tired of killing people, he said. I wanted to protect something instead of destroying it. The Queen's Guard protects the royal family. We protect tradition. We protect history. No one has to die for me to do my job. The four officers finally understood. James had not stepped down from SAS. He had stepped away from violence. He had chosen peace over war. James walked to lane 12 as he always did. But today felt different. The shooting range was quieter than usual. Other officers were still practicing, but they seemed more respectful. No one was making loud jokes or showing off. He unpacked his equipment with the same careful movements as always, loading his magazine, checking his pistol, putting on his safety glasses and ear protection. The routine was comforting. It helped him focus on the present instead of thinking about the past. Collins approached his lane cautiously. She had been rehearsing what to say for the past hour, but now that she was standing next to him, the words seemed inadequate. James, she said softly, I want to apologize again, not just for yesterday, but for all the times I saw you here and thought less of you. James looked up from his pistol. You do not need to apologize anymore, he said. You did not know. That is no excuse, Collins replied. I should not have judged you based on your current job. Military service deserves respect regardless of what someone does afterward. James loaded a round into the chamber of his pistol. Military service is just a job, he said. Some people serve in the kitchen. Some people serve in combat. We all did what was needed. What you did was more than just a job, Collins insisted. Counter-terrorism saves innocent lives. What you did mattered. James was quiet for a moment. He raised his pistol and fired a shot at his target. Perfect center hit, as always. Sometimes it mattered, he said finally. Sometimes innocent people were saved. But sometimes, he did not finish the sentence. Collins understood. War was complicated. Even the good guys sometimes made mistakes. Even heroes sometimes had regrets. Torres approached from the other side. He looked nervous but determined to speak. James, I was wondering, Torres began. Would you be willing to help train some of our younger officers? We have several new recruits who need to improve their marksmanship. James fired another shot. Before answering, I am not a firearms instructor. No, but you are the best shot any of us have ever seen, Torres replied. These young officers could learn a lot from you. James considered the request. He had been thinking about ways to help people since leaving SAS. Teaching other officers to shoot better could save lives. Better marksmanship meant fewer innocent bystanders getting hurt in shootouts. I could help in my spare time, James said, but only basic marksmanship. I will not teach advanced tactical shooting. Torres nodded eagerly. Of course, just the fundamentals. Breathing, stance, sight alignment. The basics that make the difference between hitting and missing. Hayes joined the conversation. The department would pay you for instruction time, he offered. James shook his head. I do not want money for this, but I do have one condition. What is it? Hayes asked. No questions about my military service, James said firmly. We focus on shooting technique only. My past stays in the past. Hayes agreed immediately. Done. When can you start? James fired 3 more shots at his target. All perfect hits. Next week. But remember, I'm still a full-time Queen's Guard. Training sessions will have to work around my duty schedule. Collins felt a wave of respect for James. Even after everything they had put him through, he was willing to help their junior officers improve. He was still serving his community, just in a different way. Thank you, she said sincerely. This means a lot. James finished his practice session and began packing his equipment. There is something else, he said. What happened here yesterday cannot become gossip. I chose ceremonial duties because they are quiet and private. I do not want to become some kind of celebrity. Torres understood completely. No one will talk about your background, he promised. We will keep it professional. Hayes nodded in agreement. Your privacy will be protected. You have my word. James slung his equipment bag over his shoulder. Good. Then I will see you next week for the first training session. As James walked toward the exit, Chen called out to him. James, wait. He turned around to face her. "I just wanted to say thank you," Chen said, "for everything you did in service. And for what you are doing now. Both jobs matter." James smiled slightly. It was the first time any of the officers had seen him smile. "Thank you," he said simply. After James left, the 4 officers stood together in the shooting range. They were all thinking about what had just happened. "I feel like an idiot," Collins said. "Here I was, thinking I was some tough detective. And all this time, there was a real warrior standing right next to me." "We all missed it," Torres said. "He blends in perfectly. That is probably part of his training." Hayes was looking at the target James had been shooting. 5 perfect holes clustered in the center ring. "You know what impresses me most?" he said. "What?" Chen asked. "He could have shown off from the beginning," Hayes explained. "He could have embarrassed us on his first day here. Instead, he just quietly practiced and minded his own business. He only demonstrated his skills when we pushed him into it." Collins nodded. "That takes real discipline and humility." Torres was thinking about James's transition from special forces to ceremonial duties. "It must be hard," he said, "going from life or death missions to standing guard at a palace." "Maybe that is exactly what he needed," Chen suggested. "Maybe after years of combat, standing still and protecting something peaceful is healing." Hayes agreed. "Some warriors need to fight. Others need to find peace." James chose peace over. The next few weeks, James kept his promise to help train the junior officers. He came to the shooting range twice a week during his off-duty hours. He worked with 6 young constables who were struggling with their marksmanship qualifications. James was a patient and effective teacher. He did not talk about combat or tactical situations. Instead, he focused on the fundamentals of accurate shooting, proper stance, consistent grip, controlled breathing, smooth trigger pull. The improvement in the young officers was dramatic. Within a month, all 6 had passed their marksmanship tests with high scores. 2 of them achieved perfect scores for the first time in their careers. Word of James's teaching ability spread quietly through the police department. Other officers began asking if they could attend his informal classes. James agreed, but only on condition that the sessions remained small and low-key. Collins often watched James work with the younger officers. She was amazed by his patience and attention to detail. He would spend 20 minutes helping one officer correct a small flaw in their shooting stance. He never showed frustration or impatience, even when progress was slow. "You are a natural teacher," Collins told him after one session. James was cleaning his pistol, as he always did after shooting. "Teaching is just sharing knowledge," he said. "Everyone has something to teach someone else." "What did the army teach you about teaching?" Collins asked. James paused in his cleaning. "The army taught me that good soldiers make other soldiers better. If your team is weak, everyone suffers. If your team is strong, everyone benefits." Torres nodded. "That makes sense. You are making our whole department stronger by helping these officers improve." James reassembled his pistol with quick, practiced movements. "That is the idea," he said. As the months passed, James became a respected figure at the shooting range. Officers who had once ignored him now greeted him warmly. His quiet demeanor and obvious skills earned him admiration from everyone who met him. But James never forgot why he had chosen his current path. Every morning, he put on his red uniform and took his position outside Buckingham Palace. Tourists took pictures of him. Children waved at him. He stood perfectly still for hours at a time, protecting the traditions and institutions of his country. It was peaceful work, honorable work, work that helped preserve something good instead of destroying something bad. During his lunch breaks, James sometimes reflected on his journey from Special Forces soldier to ceremonial guard. He had given up the excitement and danger of combat operations. He had traded the brotherhood of elite military units for the solitude of standing guard. But he had gained something more valuable than what he had lost. He had found peace with himself. He had found a way to serve that did not require him to take lives. He had found respect from people who understood that true strength sometimes meant choosing gentleness over violence. The shooting range had become a bridge between his 2 lives. It was where he could use his military skills to help others without returning to the world of combat and killing. It was where former soldiers and current police officers could learn from each other and grow stronger together. James Mitchell had found his place in the world. He was no longer a weapon pointed at enemies. He was a guardian standing watch over the things that mattered most. He was a teacher helping others become better versions of themselves. He was exactly who he wanted to be, and that, more than any medal or commendation from his military service, was the achievement he was most proud of.